Not too long ago, I was flying across the country, and I don't know if you've ever been on a flight where they actually ask people for volunteers to move around. And when you're dressed like this, people expect you to volunteer. So the flight attendant looks at me as she says into the microphone, "Are there any volunteers?" And I kind of laughed and I raised my hand, pick me, pick me. And she took me back to the very last seat of the airplane, the one by the bathroom that doesn't recline. And there was a gentleman in one of the seats, and so I joined him, and I'll call him John. And John and I, we just kind of jumped into a really lighthearted conversation about travel and movies and all sorts of things. For me, I tend to like Jesus to come up naturally in a conversation. So, and I'll even pray for the opportunity. Come, Holy Spirit. And in this particular conversation, John, at some point, he says, yeah, I was traveling and missed Easter with my family. And I thought, hey, this guy just referenced the resurrection. I'm in, So I sort of casually say, oh, so what church do you go to? And his tone totally changes. He crosses his arms, he looks straight ahead, and he's like, I knew this was coming. And I kind of laughed like, of course you did, look at me, And then he said very seriously, he's like, I'm an atheist. Now at this point, I'm aware I have the entire plane's attention. And I just stopped for a moment and I said, well, gosh, John, I'm sure you put a lot of thought into that decision. And thanks be to God, that really just opened us up into a really beautiful conversation where we both just felt really free to share and to ask each other questions. And John was brilliant. He's Ivy League, astrophysicist, really successful. And at one point, he's like explaining to me the molecular makeup of like the physical nature of the human person. And I'm like listening, it's like so fascinating. And then I just sort of jump in and I say, but what about the heart? What about the things that we long for, the things that we desire? And he didn't miss a beat. John said, you mean our desire for love? And I was like, yes, exactly, John, exactly. Where does that come from? And I'll never forget his answer. He just shook his head and he said, I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. And I was so struck by the sadness. Like, John was sad because he didn't know where this love came from, this undeniable desire for love. In all of his schooling, his research, he had not been able to find the source of his heart's deepest desire. And so I asked John just to consider that this desire of his heart for love, which we all experience as a sign of hope, really an invitation, that God is waiting not only to reveal himself to us, but to fulfill our heart's deepest desires. In this Advent, I ask each of you really to consider the deepest desires of your heart as a roadmap, leading you to him, who desires nothing more than to show us that he is real, that he is present, that he knows us, sees us, and loves us.